Around 1263 BCE, the pharaoh Ramesses II celebrated the first of his said festivals. The Grand Jubilee, taking place 30 years into his reign, was a moment of great celebration and rejoicing. In the city of Men-nefer, or Memphis, the king had undergone a series of rituals and ceremonies, including feats of strength to demonstrate his capacity for rule. The celebrations were accompanied by rejoicing and countless offerings for the great gods of Egypt. After those offerings were made, the goods themselves were distributed to courtiers, priests, and the assembled populace who came to see the event. You can imagine that with so much food, beer, and wine coming forth from the palaces, it must have been a magnificent party. As the collective hangover abated, though, sad news arrived in the palace. In the great temple of Ptah, also in Men-nefer, the priests announced the death of the Apis bull. Apis was a sacred animal who lived at Ptah's temple. His cult was old. The earliest records for it go back to the very start of Egypt's kingdom. Apis, or Khep, meaning runner, enjoyed great prestige as a kind of earthly symbol for Ptah. Not the god himself, but his living representative, or Wechem, herald. The Apis enjoyed a life of comfort, abundant feed, and plenty of cows to mate. After his death, the bull underwent a form of mummification and burial in splendor. We have a really good idea of how this went down in the days of Ramesses II. The Apis died around late June or early July of 1263 BCE. We know that because priests who participated left a dated record of the event. A stone stela discovered at Saqqara records the burial of Apis. It says, quote, "Year 30, the 3rd month of Shemu, or harvest, day 21, under the Lord of the Two Lands, Ramesses II. On this day, the incarnation of Khep, or Apis, proceeded outward and reposed in the place of embalming, together with the god Anpu, or Anubis. The god embalmed the corpse, removing the fluids, banishing the blemishes, upon the pure alabaster in the mansion of gold." End quote. The priest who made this record was named Thutmose. He was a chief in the funerary workshop, pouring water for the deceased. Chances are Thutmose was involved in the mummification of Apis. When the animal died, members of the temple staff maneuvered its body onto a sled. They dragged the carcass out of its pen to a special part of Ptah's temple. Here, they would load the body onto a broad table made of alabaster. Those mummification tables survive to this day. You can still see them in the ruins of Ptah's ancient monument. The embalmers set to work. It was messier than you might expect. In a human mummification, the mortician would cut a small hole in the abdomen and pull out organs one by one. The priests caring for Apis did not do that. Instead, they butchered the animal first, removing the meat and setting it aside. The flesh would be offered up to the gods as nourishment and consumed in ritual feasts. For the actual embalming of this animal, they only kept the head, bones, and internal organs. So, considering the size of the Apis bulls, their actual mummies were smaller than you might expect. When the mummy or parcel was ready, they placed it into a wooden coffin. Loading that onto a sled, they embarked on the funeral. The mourners assembled at Ptah's temple. There were priests and priestesses, but also government officials and members of the royal family. At their head, the cortege was led by a prince. KHA-EM-WASET, or appearing in Luxor, was the 4th son of Ramesses II. Born to the king's wife, Iset-Nofret, KHA-EM-WASET was now in his early to mid-30s. On this occasion, he wore a short wig of overlapping curls and a thick braid down one side of his head. His clothing was high quality, a linen kilt reaching down to the shins, and around his chest and shoulders, a leopard skin hung elegantly. This was the costume of a priest for Ptah, known traditionally as the Sem priest. KHA-EM-WASET was a high-ranking member of Ptah's clergy. In that capacity, he would lead the burial of Apis. This wasn't his first rodeo, so to speak. KHA-EM-WASET had led another Apis funeral back in year 16, and records of that survive from Saqqara. More on that in a moment. Back then, KHA-EM-WASET would have just been a teenager at best, probably learning the ropes of the priesthood and his role in Egypt's religious society. Now, in year 30, the prince was self-assured and ready to make his mark. As the mourning party set off, they departed the precinct of Ptah's temple. They headed west, passing through the suburbs of Men-nefer. To either side, the people of the city came out to witness the Black Parade. At the head of the cortege, priests sprinkled water on the ground and burned incense, purifying the way. Priestesses shook their sistra rattles, raising a jingling cacophony over the event. Some lifted their voices in song, or perhaps in a wail of lamentation. The death of Apis was a terrible loss, and the cult actually included professional mourners. Written records from this very period mention people like Sekhmet Nofret, or Sekhmet the Beautiful, who was a Chesit Chep, a mourner of Apis. We can imagine ladies like her singing songs for the god and calling out prayers as they marched. Prayers like the following, quote, "Giving praise to Apis the Perfect, he with the horned head, that he may give life, prosperity, health, pleasure, and joy every day, and a fine burial after old age for the one who makes the offering. He is the living one, the herald of Ptah, the Osiris Apis, the true of voice." End quote. With words such as these, the Apis funeral departed Men-nefer. The procession headed west, through the city, into the farmland, and finally the edge of the desert. Now, the cortege began to ascend the rocky paths that led to Saqqara. As they trekked up the paths, the floodplain fell away behind them. On the top of the escarpment, the vast cemetery stretched in all directions. To their left and right, the mourners passed ancient pyramids, the monuments of Teti and Userkaf, and the step pyramid of Netjeri-Ket, whom they called Djoser. Between these royal edifices, countless smaller structures, like mastaba chapels, dotted the landscape. Saqqara was a true necropolis, a city of the dead, the resting place for 100 generations of people, and for sacred animals. KHA-EM-WASET led his mourners and the mummy of Apis to a patch of ground west of the step pyramid. Here, a small cluster of chapels stood on the desert surface. These little shrines had columns and painted decoration. Nothing too fancy, but they stood out visibly against the desert wastes that stretched to the horizon. One of these chapels was fresh, created in the past few years. Beside it, a rectangular pit opened up. A staircase descended into the earth, leading to a tomb. This was the burial place of the Apis bulls, but not the one you might imagine. Today, tourists at Saqqara often visit the SERAPEUM, the underground catacombs with granite sarcophagi. That structure did not exist in 1263 BCE. It came later, and I'll explain that in a moment. In year 30 of Ramesses II, the Apis bulls still went to their grave in small, separate tombs. Archaeologists know these as the isolated tombs, distinct from the SERAPEUM proper. You can't see these anymore, they are buried by sand, but they're in the same area as the modern entrance to the SERAPEUM catacombs. Imagine a group of chapels strung north to south with small chambers underneath. That is where the funeral was going. The cortege arrived at their destination. Beneath the chapel, a short staircase descended into the earth. KHA-EM-WASET led his priests down the stairs, heading for the burial chamber. The mourners brought the mummy of Apis into the tomb, and laid it to rest within a large wooden sarcophagus. Atop that, the priests laid valuable treasures. When archaeologists discovered this tomb in the 1850s, they found the bull's remains decked out in jewelry, golden pectorals with the names of Ramesses II, amulets of cobras and vultures, the protective goddesses, and trinkets donated by high-ranking officials. Around the chamber, there were also shabti figures, those little servant statues, hundreds of them in fact, often inscribed with the names of people who donated to the burial. These folks might be little more than names today, but they left a small testimony of their piety in the burial of Apis. The mourners laid the bull into the wooden coffin. They sprinkled oils and fumigated the room with incense, reciting prayers for the god's well-being. Then, one by one, the priests and priestesses, porters, officials, and the Prince KHA-EM-WASET withdrew from the tomb. Masons hurried forward to seal the doorway with stones and plaster. Burying the entrance, cleansing the ground, the party departed solemnly. Notably, as the mourners buried this Apis, they actually had to work around another coffin already in the chamber. As I mentioned earlier, this was not the first time that KHA-EM-WASET had led an Apis funeral. About 14 years before, the prince priest had brought another bull to the same location, and when the archaeologists opened this tomb in the 1850s, they found two animals resting side by side in separate coffins. It's slightly strange. Why did KHA-EM-WASET choose to bury the bulls in the same chamber? With 14 years between them, there had been plenty of time to prepare a new tomb. Why make the animals double up? It may have been convenience, or it might have something to do with another project already underway. Just a dozen or so meters west of the chapel, a team of diggers were opening a pit in the sands of Saqqara. They were planning a new monument, something more convenient, a tomb that would serve the Apis bulls for the next 1,000 years. This is where the SERAPEUM begins. Sort of. In 1263 BCE, give or take, royal workers began digging a tunnel beneath the surface of Saqqara. It was a passage oriented south to north, with space for small chambers branching off the sides. Apparently, the priests of Ptah, or KHA-EM-WASET himself, decided that the isolated tombs were no longer satisfactory. Instead of building a new chapel and tomb for every generation, they would make something more versatile, a place for future Apis burials. The new monument took the shape of a catacomb. Archaeologists call this the lesser vaults of the SERAPEUM. Again, these are not the ones that tourists visit. Those are the greater vaults, and they came about 800 years later. What KHA-EM-WASET started was smaller, a set of chambers just east of the more famous catacombs. You actually walk past the lesser vaults when you descend to the later crypts. Going down the staircase, you are technically walking over the top of them. And on your left, another stairway, barred by a gate, leads to that older section. The lesser vaults are closed today. In antiquity, part of the roof collapsed, and after their excavation, archaeologists backfilled the site with clean sand to protect it from the elements. The lesser vaults do not have massive stone sarcophagi or any distinctive decoration, so there's nothing your average tourist would find interesting. But they are there, beneath the sand, the work of KHA-EM-WASET and his priests. As the builders got to work on these lesser vaults, KHA-EM-WASET was also planning other monuments. Close to the SERAPEUM itself, the prince apparently commissioned a temple for the bull. It's gone today, but a few fragments have survived. They include decoration that show gods of the Nile bringing offerings to the Apis. The names of Ramesses II and KHA-EM-WASET appear on these pieces, so they have a secure date. The prince also donated statues to this temple, including one with a beautiful prayer. A beautiful statue showed the Apis bull with a small figure of KHA-EM-WASET before him. On the base of that statue, the prince inscribed a prayer a wish that he should be remembered for his deeds. He said, quote, "O all who come and who will see that which I have done, let them remember my name with an offering, and let them recite the statute texts. One shall reward he who acts thus. May your lord Ptah favor you. May Sokar love you. May you bequeath your offices to your children. May you rest safe in your desert tombs, just as you maintain my statue in its eternal place. I am a son who does what is beneficial, beloved of the gods. O you priests who act in the temple of Apis every morning, make a libation and incense. Offer to me with your alms. Remember my name with an offering upon the altar of the temple. I have done that which Ptah desires. I am a benefactor to his spirit. I erected the god's house, his temple. The deities repose in their proper places. So let such a thing be done accordingly for me. May you maintain my statue in its place eternally, because I was the benefactor of Apis." End quote. Unfortunately, the location of this statue is currently unknown. It was discovered in the early 20th century, but since then no academic has seen it. So we'll have to extend our greetings to KHA-EM-WASET by a long distance. Wherever he is, may his name live forever, and his offerings to Apis live in eternity. As the new catacombs took shape, KHA-EM-WASET looked out on Saqqara and saw other opportunities, places where he could do good work and leave a name for himself. Across the cemetery of Saqqara and Abu Sir to the north, Prince KHA-EM-WASET left a series of inscriptions documenting restoration work. Apparently, the prince and his assistants led a series of inspections on monuments of the Old Kingdom. By 1263 BCE, these pyramids and tombs were over 1,000 years old. Imagine today we dispatch conservators to the tombs of Charlemagne, Alfred the Great, or the Emperor Taizong. That would roughly be the equivalent. I wonder how KHA-EM-WASET felt about these age-old monuments. Were they symbols of a forgotten time, or visible reminders of the continuity that Egypt had achieved? I suspect the latter, though the prince's inscriptions do acknowledge the decay wrought by time. In one text, on the pyramid of Unas, KHA-EM-WASET wrote the following, quote, "The king of southern and northern Egypt, Ramesses II, etc., etc., and the king of southern and northern Egypt, Unas. His person, Ramesses, decreed that the chief directing artisans, the Sem-priest, and king's son, KHA-EM-WASET, should restore the name of the king of southern and northern Egypt, Unas. Now, that king's name was not found on the face of his pyramid. KHA-EM-WASET desired greatly to restore the monuments of the kings, because what they had made was falling into decay. KHA-EM-WASET established a decree for the pyramid's sacred offerings. He endowed a land grant together with its personnel, and provisions from the royal granaries. It was done by KHA-EM-WASET that he may achieve the state of given life." End quote. In other words, the king's son, supposedly on Ramesses' orders, inspected monuments like the Pyramid of Unas, and finding them in a state of decay, effected repairs. He also inaugurated new offerings, with agricultural estates to support those provisions. He did this from a sense of piety, and so that by enacting such restorations, KHA-EM-WASET's own name would live forever. Inscriptions like these appear on many structures throughout Saqqara, Abu Sir, and nearby monuments. Today, the Pyramid of Unas is the best preserved, and you can go see it. It's on the south side of the pyramid, opposite to the entrance. The prince left other restoration texts on the step pyramid of Djoser, the pyramid of Sahra at Abu Sir, episode 11, and the sun temple of King Neusera, episode 14. Such works were an act of piety, and they have made KHA-EM-WASET famous today. The prince is often known as the first Egyptologist on account of his inspections and restoration works. If we're being pedantic, the prince was not really doing this from an archaeological perspective. He was coming more as a conservator, an equally important job, but not quite the same as what an Egyptologist does. But that's beside the point. KHA-EM-WASET has gained special recognition as an early caretaker for Egypt's cultural heritage. He wasn't the first to do such inspections and restorations, nor was he the last. But he is the best recorded in terms of the monumental inscriptions, and if you're judging it purely on how much information survives, then his restoration works were quite successful. From that sense, we can salute this proto-pioneer of Egyptology. Across his monuments, KHA-EM-WASET expressed a wish to be remembered, that his name should live forever. In this pursuit, he succeeded remarkably well. In ages yet to come, KHA-EM-WASET would achieve an unusual kind of celebrity. He would be immortalized as a folk hero who undertook expeditions into long-forgotten monuments and recovered works of magic and wisdom from the very gods themselves. Next episode, I'd like to jump ahead and explore that legacy to see how KHA-EM-WASET became a figure of legend. Before I go, I would like to extend my special gratitude to everyone who supports the show at patreon.com/Egypt podcast. In particular, I must thank the priests. These fine folks give most generously every month, and I am eternally in their debt. My deepest thanks to Linda, Chris, James B., Terry, Andy and Chelsea, Carlos, TJ, Mycost, Andrew, Erin, Karen, C-Yen, Dan B., Kate, Suyon, Eryan, Yola, Niden, Dan S., Eric, Alicia, Veronica, and Jeffrey. And a special welcome to Farhan, who joined the priesthood at the end of February. Farhan, thank you so much for your generosity. To everyone listening, thank you for joining me. May Apis, the runner, bring prosperity, happiness, and a long life to you and your loved ones. I'll see you soon.